So for local taxes, keep in mind our voters approved in a calendar year $1 million increase in authorization every year. Except for, so 14 was the last year of the old levy amount, 15 is the new levy amount, that's why this isn't closer to $1 million, it's a little bit higher. And then you'll see that the following year, it's about $1 million, it's just a little formula, the voters authorized $1 million. The following year, without that 4%, we could drop. So that's what we're projecting at this time.
So that last year is with that drop?
So far, yeah. There are so many variables in the levy formula, so we used our best assumptions, took away the 4%, and said we won't receive $1 million increase in that year because of the percentage drop. Staff mix is this formula combination of how much education a teacher has, you know, anywhere from a bachelor's to a PhD, and then how many years of experience. So if you're a brand new teacher, bachelor's, no experience, your staff mix factor is a 1.0. And then if you're like a PhD with more than 16 years, you're like 1.8888. And then they average that. So our staff mix, our experience in education went down a little bit. So we get less money, but we also pay less on the other side. So I will show you that it does not hurt us. It's just a function of increased enrollment after some other adjustments. We budget our enrollment very conservatively. So when we plugged in the new updated numbers, we're expecting a little bit additional state apportionment this year. You'll see quite a bit of gain in the ensuing years because we predicted enrollment would go up, however much we did, say 300, and maybe it's closer to 350. And so the initial growth was already factored in this number. This is just the additional growth. But the following years, that's that 170, the 310, the enrollment growth. Pension increase, we will get state funding, and then you'll see on my expenditure slide, we'll also pay it out. Okay. And then we expect it to go, it's expected to go up to like 12%. And then I'm hoping it holds steady because 12% is huge. The COLA, the part that the state funds us after for all 3 years. And then the one-time bump up for the material supplies operating costs in the first year. Transportation formula. Transportation is based on the prior year. So when we do the budget, when we do the budget for the ensuing year, we certainly don't have all that data complete. We haven't even finished the school year when we try to do the budget. So they provide us their formula, we take a look and make an adjustment as necessary. Also, just wanted to throw this out really quick. Transportation is not fully funded, despite what the state says. Because, for instance, we were saying that our drivers drive 4.5 hours, they get a full benefits package. The state provides about 50% of that, 55%, 60%. So the state gives us 60% for the driver who we're giving the full benefits package to. And that's a part of collective bargaining.
So one of the, not to get too
Sideways.
far down the rabbit hole on that, but one of the things that we've done over the recent years is with our tiered transportation system, to try and get as many of our drivers as possible to the 6, 7, 8 hour a day level, so that we're maximizing the efficiency of the fact that we do have to pay them a full benefits package. So we're trying to get them as close to full time as we can. So again, if we make any changes that all of a sudden the driver who's now doing 3 or possibly 4 tiers is only doing 1 or possibly 2 tiers, we're likely to have many more drivers and many more drivers that will be closer to that 4.5 hour minimum than closer to the 8 hour day full time. So that's part of the efficiency that we'll lose with our current system, or could lose with our current system.
Because we don't prorate benefits. If you're more than half-time, you get a full benefit package. If you're less than half-time, you get zero.
There's also things that factor in, so if you think of the transportation matrix that Ryan sent that was in the briefing right before the holidays, that kind of shows the last several years progression. There's also a lot of transportation that we provide that doesn't get captured in the state formula that we don't get any funding for. That's just our local choice to do it, and
That's the 4 million.
Actually, have it right here.
That's is that all the local choice stuff?
there's some of our
There was
local
like a
choice stuff, yes,
listing.
there's
I have
listing
it,
and.
yeah.
So I just want to say, so I mean, I just want to piggyback on what Lydia's saying, the comment made earlier in the day that we're now fully funded for transportation. The state would say we are fully funded for transportation for what they fund.
Yeah.
However, what that costs us and what local decisions we've made to provide programming services beyond what the state captures in their funding formula, there's still an imbalance between the money we'll get from the state for transportation and what it'll actually cost us. It's part of that sheet, yeah.
Lydia, have you heard anything about a pension change for bus drivers that will make it more difficult to attract drivers? I didn't have enough context for a brief conversation I had at a conference with a former bus driver who's now a school director that said that it may be more difficult to find, especially substitute drivers, but also drivers because of some pension deal.
So part of the, and I don't know if it applies to classified employees, but I know with the cert employees, it's also an issue with certificated substitutes that the changes that were made for the Plan 3 retirees, that if they retire early, part of their early retirement to get their retirement benefits, although at a reduced level, is they cannot work in a school district.
That's actually, I think,
And
what she
so-
was talking about now.
So that, until they were age 65.
Yeah.
And then they can come back and work a certain number of hours a year. So there's a little loophole in the law there that we hope will get addressed in the coming session, because we think one of the, not the be-all end-all solution, but part of the solution to address the substitute shortage is if we can bring back those folks who retired prior to age 65 in Plan 3, who right now would lose their retirement benefit if they came back to work as substitutes. So we're hoping we get a legislative fix on it.
Inability to do that, I wonder if that will impact what we will have to pay for the tractor. We can't draw on the overheating.
Well, certainly the market will take care of that, you know, so if we,
I tried. You did, it's freezing.
I know, I tried at
so let's keep going.
1.
It's not really cold.
Any more questions on revenues? I'll jump to expenditures.
You tried.
So, for the current year, so we have our budget that you adopted last summer. And then we continue to, look and make sure our assumptions are still valid and what needs to be adjusted or tweaked. So on the flip side of the $850,000 decrease in state revenues, we also expect that we're paying out $1.05 million less. So probably a net gain of $200 to the good for this year. We certainly have money for enrollment growth, but we also, in places where the enrollment growth doesn't say, okay, you had 20, now you have 21. It comes all over the place. So we mitigate that growth with teachers or aides. So that was our estimated unplanned cost of the mitigation. We also, for the Fernwoods and Canyon Creeks, Doug Hale has been working intently with those schools, saying, we know you're larger than expected, we know you have some needs, what can we get you this year and into the future until you start to come back down in size to help with those unique problems, the Frank loves. The risk and safety and security manager, we expect that they'll be hired midway through the year. So half the cost this year, half the cost going into next year, and then ongoing cost. The North Shore Primary Center, we certainly need an assistant principal and school aides and food service people and teachers.
It's both a kindergarten, is that correct?
There,
It's gonna be a combination of full and half-day kindergarten, 15, 16, and probably full and half-day kindergarten, and a handful of first grade classes in
Okay,
16.
so we will need food. I just couldn't remember what
Think-
we were
just
having there.
Think of it as a smaller school.
Yeah,
it's
but I
gonna
didn't
be
know if we
all
were
in.
having more, we're mixing it full and half.
Yes, we are. Yeah, we are.
You gave us that information.
So Chris costed out our best, you know, view of how we think the staffing's gonna look next year. And it's, you know, it's a smaller school. So, contract changes, so we have some contract changes expected in June, and then that's predominantly, North Shore, teachers going into 15-16 because their contract is done for 15-16. What is unknown is NSD, the paraprofessionals, are open for next year. Neoba, the office professionals, are open next year. Those are two very large groups that will have impacts. We don't know what those impacts are yet because it's early. And then some smaller groups
For 14, right?
for 15-16. So what we try to do is 14-15 current, the increase or decrease going into 15-16. So this number, this contract cost wraps up into total costs, total expenditure costs.
$1,080,000 is really just the 1.2% gap between what the governor's funding versus the 3% contract for teachers.
So it's a double-edged sword. If he funds the full 3%, that will help us with the teachers' union because they're maxed at 3, no matter what the source. If he funds 3%, it's gonna hurt the rest of the groups. Because you pass through what the state approves.
So we'll have to pay less for teachers, but more for all of them.
Because remember,
No, I don't remember. 'cause you-
Every-
you and I have never been.
every non-teacher that's funded, non-certificated principal or teacher is funded at less than $33,000 for an entire work year, which is a little less than $15 an hour. So that's the
Not
rub.
realistic.
But that,
It's
does
not
that,
even what Seattle wants for,
Does that-
you know, food service
does
workers.
that change with McClary?
So it's, that's a big,
That's what they're asking.
that's a really
That's
big.
a question they're asking.
Some legislators would say no, that compensation is outside the bounds of McCleary. Others, myself included, would say compensation is the biggest expense of school districts. You have to include that as part of McCleary, or else what's the point of McCleary? I mean, if 85% of our expenditures somehow don't fall under McCleary, you're missing our biggest cost center, so.
And the state had a work group that
And that's
studied it
your-
and has made recommendations about what they expected.
And that's your cute article that you're not required to read, but the second page is
Oh, it's
nice,
on that.
quick and easy graph about compensation. Okay, so that,
At least I'm asking all the right questions.
You are.
So it seems like we're gonna be talking about it.
The North Peak Municipal started this year.
capital,
So
Oh, really? Is that where it's
Seriously.
going?
during
You
the
can do
two,
that?
during the
Planning
planning.
principle.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Because
But
they're
that-
not, because they don't have that building they're associated with, that's why you can put it
And
into
not
the
open.
capital?
So because part of their responsibilities, or a large part of their responsibilities, will be tied to the construction of the school.
Carol was a project
So you
manager for the
can,
school.
right, so you can capitalize. Now, once the school opens,
Yep.
then they have to go over to general fund.
Okay.
But for these couple of years, they are a bona fide capital project. And that person won't start until July 1 anyway, so they'll just have a couple of months in this school year.
okay, so, the red column, the increase, decrease, there are no decreases going into 15-16. To get that extra time for grades 9 through 12, we threw out a rough estimate. Carolyn is working hard on coming up with some options on how that's gonna be done. The pension increase, which they will provide, you know, about $1.7 million in revenues, will cost us about $3.4 million back out. So that's a hit.
So I think that's 1.6 million.
Yes, that, we have to find. Staff increases for enrollment growth, we're certainly getting the money for enrollment growth. We also have to add classroom teachers and other positions. Large school staffing, that's just a continuation of the plan we'll start this year. The risk manager I talked about, the primary center, contract changes. And then down below, the utilities insurance is about a 3% increase. And then we'll continue to review. Gets real squishy and vague the ensuing years. Actually, it's real squishy and vague right now. Next year, because the legislature. Continued staff increases for enrollment growth. You can see going into 17-18. This is our estimate of what it's going to cost to run a high school on a yearly basis. That's not the teachers, that's, the principal, an office manager, a librarian, positions that don't follow the kids, but go with the school. Yeah. So the teachers go with the school, but the teachers go with the kids, sorry, librarian stays with the school. Okay, so this is office manager, utilities, all sorts of custodians, groundskeepers, everything.
Athletics, sports teams, coaches.
Sports teams, contractual stipends that go to a building.
Why did the staff increase for enrollment growth go down?
Because we're projecting fewer numbers of kids.
It's based off
So that 16-17 school year, we're projecting the most.
Goes down a little bit, 16, 17,
Really? We're gonna have fewer kids?
Well,
No,
you
not
in
fewer.
growth.
Fewer additional.
Slower growth.
Slower.
Oh,
Slower growth.
Okay.
Continued growth,
but it's slow.
growth. Okay, North Creek, we're still estimating the 2 million towards the high school, maybe $500,000 in other places to be decided. And then I missed the bottom. This is the cost of the COLA, the percentages that I expressed, to the district, not what's getting funded by the state. So again, like the pension, there's a net shortfall. And then, I know this is squished, I should have probably just taken this. These top sections you just saw on the last 2 pages. This is what it means at the bottom. So, coming in to this school year, we have set aside $1 million for North Creek High School. After this year, revenues, expenditures, set aside another $500,000. Dawn, we believe that, well, it's pretty firm that it'll be about, $350,000, that minimum fund balance goes up. So, and then in your answer, Kimberly, is where does the extra above 3% go? And it goes in this unassigned. And it is available to start the next school year off.
Okay.
So you take this 25 and you put it way up there, and that's how you start
As part of the next year's
the
revenue.
year.
So we're under budget this year, what our plan was.
With all the
We're
tweaks,
kind of right at it.
we're kind of right at it.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep,
And
25,
very soft pencil to all this.
yeah, 25,000 on a $213 million expenditure budget is a sneeze, really. But,
Yeah.
and that's our projections, and we monitor it all year long. The following year, with all the COLA and pension changes, and we believe, so we're starting with the 25 and the revenues, expenditures, set aside another $500,000, set aside a little bit less increase for that 3% minimum fund balance because the expenditures didn't jump as fast as they did going into this year. That's interesting.
Exactly the same.
783 minus, that's, I apologize, we can look at this like 500 times, and
But it's not that hard to figure out. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like another 75,000.
basically it's 783 plus 25 is about 800. This should be closer to about 50 left over. Our apologies, that same 50 would carry over. We'll have a little bit of a peak going into this year, you know, almost 450 that carries over, and then we go back down again. So that 450 that we carry into 17, 18 will probably get used by those one-time startup costs, some of the other adjustments. We'll take away 2.5 million startup costs and be left with, you know, a positive, expected a positive balance.
And just keep in mind, I mean, as hesitant as we are about what's gonna happen for 15, 16, you're talking about a whole new legislative session by that
Yeah.
period of time, so, you know, and you'll have this update every January from that point forward with our best thinking of the time, so. The farther out the numbers get, the squishier they become.
Erasable.
Okay, then I'm gonna go back to the governor's budget real quick, Kimberly, on the, how we were talking about K-3 class size and try and all that good information. So if we drop teachers to 1 teacher for every 17 students and increase, you know, every half-day section of kindergarten that we have to a full-day section, we estimate that we need another 175 teachers. Their base pay, we're estimating based off current data, at, you know, over 13 million. With teachers also comes additional staffing, librarians, music instruction. It's their planning time release. So each teacher has, the kids once a day go to music or PE, and you know this because you've got a daughter already. So that's the extra planning time staff that comes with the teachers. The material supplies operating costs, not for most of the kids, but the kids who went from a half day of kindergarten to a full day of kindergarten need additional materials money. So we're expecting an additional $16 million of state funding for the governor's plan. We will lose about 2.3 million of tuition that we're currently collecting. Because we won't charge them.
Oh,
because
that's
the-
right, that's
Yeah,
right,
because the
okay.
state's now funding
Okay.
it. So 13,755 of new revenues based on the governor's budget. So same thing, the teacher base pay is the same both ways. The time responsibility incentive package is an average of $19,600 for every full-time teacher. Okay? Then we said, where do we put 175 teachers? We could get 2 at Hollywood Hill. So, not that we have schools, we were just doing this as a
Yeah.
financial exercise, not a realistic exercise. We said a good size elementary is 525. Okay? So that would cause us to need 7 more schools. The average elementary school is 750,000 of costs above the teacher costs and the principal and all that good stuff. So we think it would cost us 22 million to hire those 175 teachers for a net loss of $8.6 million.
Or a local cost, would be another way of thinking about it.
Yeah, a local cost that,
Oh, not including, where are we,
well,
where are
yeah,
the 7 schools coming from?
this is,
Well, that's,
That's just
That's
another
another-
thing.
that's a different
It's a
fund.
different department, I know.
Yeah.
Teachers in a classroom, so it's the individual teacher classroom ratio of 17:1, because I believe
Yes.
that what actually passed was you could put other people, realizing that you have to have other staff, that you didn't have to use it all in teachers, so would that
that's
number be?
1351. That,
Yeah.
and this is just purely the governor's budget.
Oh, okay.
Yep, and
Okay.
yes, so Chris and I, so next slide.
So he went with teachers, and then on top of that, the extra people.
1351 is even more convoluted than counting kids and putting them in pockets of 17. It is convoluted
Oh, the governor's saying, let's just make it 17.
for for K through 3 only.
And we're
And
not
add
gonna
full
worry
day
about 13,
kindergarten.
15, well, we're gonna do this anyway. That's
We're
what
just
his
gonna
budget
do
is.
this.
Right,
Yeah.
this is the
He's gonna
McCleary
be,
kind of,
he's gonna be just do it, and he's gonna, okay,
McCleary.
All right.
Because that's a recommendation.
okay.
So what we said is, now this is OSPI's data. They had to give the district something to help us because you could spend the next, 120 hours straight trying to do what ifs. This is like, what if? And I'm like, oh. So we just went with OSPI's. Currently, they say they fund 57.5 principals. We would need to hire an additional 4 principals. I don't know how you hired 4.15 principals. We think this is the compensation gap. A principal, the funding for a principal is about $58,000 for a full-time principal, the state funding. And our principals don't make $58,000 a year for full-time. So this times this is what we're estimating our local cost to be for the initiative. And you're correct, we didn't do any of the double up of classrooms, but we also, in this exercise, we didn't add schools.
You
So.
didn't what?
Add
Yeah,
a school.
right.
Right, because you had 7 in the last
So
one.
the
That's
other
4 principals.
exercise,
Because you wouldn't need a school in this town.
oh, we need
Oh,
schools.
we would
Okay.
need
Yeah,
to-
you
Yeah.
said
So-
schools.
So this is really kind of an academic exercise, just to show that unless there is sort of wholesale compensation reform, to fund all of these new positions, but to still fund them in the same formula creates this massive local tail of expenditures because the state doesn't come close to funding what the actual cost of the positions are. So take like the custodian line, for instance. We currently get allocated for 81 custodians. I-31 would add us 5, or, we already have more than 86 custodians in our district already. So we might not necessarily add 5 custodians. It might help us get closer to paying for the custodians that we do have. But this exercise just says if we staffed up to the levels that I-1351 envisions, the local cost to us would be $12,500,000. And that's the message that
At
I
a
conveyed.
low conservative level.
Yeah, a low conservative, and that's the
Before
message.
building schools.
Without buildings.
Without
Without
building
building
schools.
schools.
And so just think back to the letter that I sent to legislators that was in your briefing last Friday. This is the picture we're painting. I mean, they do these things that they think are good for us, and then they come back and wonder why we're unhappy with things like smaller class sizes or full-day kindergarten or all that. Well, it's
But they
because
didn't even do the people building.
because they don't fully fund us to add the programs. From their perspective, they do, but.
Those of you that came with us to the individual meetings, you saw a lot of our state legislators are unaware
Yes, completely.
Of the tail.
well, that they don't fully, what they give us in funding is not what we're spending on salaries.
Right.
So that was an eye-opening exercise
Right.
that we will continue to.
So that's our message, that if they don't tackle the big gorilla in the room, which is compensation reform, all the other money they give us, whether it's MSOCs or transportation or whatever it may be, gets increasingly sucked into this vortex of paying for staff costs that are so out of line with what the state allocates. But it's such, the numbers for the state are so big to try and bridge that gap that they just continue to ignore it. Well, the longer they continue to ignore it, the bigger the gap gets, the bigger the problem is to solve, so.
I mean, I would imagine that if you're in certain parts of the state, like in Yakima or something, that the compensation is probably lower.
For some positions, they probably
Let's
don't
say
have
teacher
as big,
salary.
they probably don't have as big a teacher tri-package as you might find in the Puget Sound region, but, they still have a
Does
teacher
the
tri-package.
state break it up by area that
No,
you live in?
no,
So that'd be a
no.
good.
It-
I'd like
But
to
the
be-
flip
I mean, but that, don't you think that'd be kind of a good way to do
They've,
it?
Cost
they've
of
talked
living
about
areas.
that
Yeah.
regional cost of living adjustments. The flip side for Yakima is that they probably cannot, their community will not support a local levy at the level that our community will either, so.
That's why
They
they
have
talk
lower
about the
costs,
levy
but
swap.
but they also probably receive a lesser percentage of their budget in local levy dollars because that's just too much of a tax burden for their community.
And might not be able to pass bonds.
definitely struggle to pass bonds, much more so than we do, so.
So the last thing I'll say, and I'll wrap it up, is we would not presume to staff this way. It is an academic exercise. You will notice that they're funding certificated nurses, we have classified nurses. We would not fire all our classified nurses and make them go get their teaching degree in order to come back to us. So it's just an order of magnitude. And if the price tag to North Shore is 12.5 million, and our total fund balance at the end of last year was about 12.5 million, so it, we could get by for a year, maybe. There's no way I believe that the state can afford its price tag. But that's Lydia's opinion.
So our message is just that they have to tackle the big kahuna, which is compensation.
Look how big Chris's kids are getting.
Are those yours?
So they're my kids looking for money.
That's cute.
Uh-huh,
That's great.
uh-huh.
That's great.
Now, this always feels like such a lot of work that you put into something that is just like
Amorphous.
gossamer
good.
thread. Yeah, I know, I
It's
know.
gossamer thread, I like
It
that.
is,
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yep. So
Thank you very much.
it will change and we'll keep our eye on it. and-
So when's our next budget? I forget, what's the cycle of us meeting and study sessions for budget meetings?
We don't have
So we
some-
really don't have another study session until July.
Oh, we don't have like
Present
a
the
cycle
budget,
that we
but we'll
go
have-
through?
Not
we'll
a
have-
session.
We'll have checkpoints along the way, for instance, enrollment projection we'll be doing in February.
The second meeting in February will
So
tell you
do
what
we
we
usually
think.
have two a year? Because I remember
If
one
you look
last
at the
year.
timeline that we had in our agenda tonight, it spells that all out in there. So
Which is our normal way of doing it two a year? Like because I remember last year we did one at the
Oh,
same one.
there's no reason to do one in between now and when there
Until we actually have
are
a budget.
numbers that are actual meaningful numbers.
It's kind of a round two,
Yeah.
we do a
Yeah.
check-in kind of now and we do it.
So we check in with enrollment and staffing
Yeah.
before July. The only time we've ever had an extra one is in a significant budget cutting year,
I
like
see.
$7 million.
That's when they took money away in the middle of the year, right?
There's been that too. So we
So
don't,
if something major happens, then we
Yes.
have another session. But
if
otherwise we
they
just
said
wait
we're
till
gonna
July.
take away $10 million to make it work, we would schedule
A
a session.
I see.
Otherwise, we will
Let's
proceed.
not, that's not gonna happen,
No,
but
no,
just
no.
if.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So the two is standard.
That's crazy.
That's what it's 2 a year.
2 years.
Yeah.
Okay, you good?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia.
Sure.
Thanks, Lydia. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Oh, are we done or we have more?
No, we're good.
Are we
You
done?
want more?
Do you want to?
Don't leave me alone.
I told you I'd try to keep it short for you.
Great job, Lydia.
Thank you.
We're up 6:38. Are you kidding me? I didn't think I was gonna be home before 9 tonight.
I did.
It was my
Oh, you have a blankie? Do you have
I have
lockers here?
one.
We have lockers. You should go to the locker.